Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming here. When I was 8, my mom told me the story. Here's how it goes. So once upon a time, there was this young girl. She was smart and strong. When she left for university to study English literature, she took with her her love for her mother language, Bangla. Half the students at her university spoke a different mother language, Assamese, and she wanted to be friends with them, so she said, what the heck, I'll just go ahead and learn that language too. So she learned Assamese. But there were some very misguided people at her university who believed that anyone who spoke Bangla, who loved Bangla, needed to leave their land, needed to leave their university. One night, they conspired to come after this girl. Scared for her life, she hid herself in the storage unit of a dorm room all night. And on her bed lay a decoy, a bolster. When she came out of hiding the next morning, all her class notes and her textbooks were burning. And the bolster had been stabbed and ripped into pieces. You're wondering why, right? Because to her assailants, the only identity that mattered was that she was a Bengali, and they hated Bengalis. When I turned 12, I found out that girl was my mom. Okay, enough of the depressing stories. Moving on, right? Would you happen to know one word for a necklace made of yellow stone beads? The Aka, which is a tribe in far northeastern India, call it Tradzi. In fact, the Aka have 26 different words for beads that you can't find a translation of in English. What would be a language in your native language, a word in your native language for singing with the rhythms of riding a horse? The Tuvan, who live in the Russian Federation, actually call it Ezenglir. Now, what do Aka and Tuvan have in common? They're both endangered languages. Aka is spoken by between 1,000 to 2,000 speakers, and Tuvan is spoken by about 235,000 speakers, according to Russ Reimer's Vanishing Voices, which he published in the July 2012 edition of the National Geographic magazine. According to a BBC report by Rachel Newer in 2014, we've already lost 400 languages in the past century. That is one language every 3 months. If you want to believe conservative estimates, we're going to lose another half of the remaining 6,000 plus languages before the next century rolls around. Right? I come from India, where collectively we speak several hundred languages, but typically we learn to speak English, we learn to speak Hindi, and often we learn to speak a mother language, a language in which our moms tell us stories, a language in which our moms, it comes naturally to them, and they sing to their unborn children in that language. What has all of this got to do with my mom? Good question. Let me explain. This is the Indian state of Assam, where my mom grew up. Several linguistic identities exist in this one tiny state. What you see here, the region in blue, is majority Bengali-speaking people. What you see here circled in red is majority Assamese-speaking people. In the 1960s, there was this political movement that started gaining a lot of popularity. And in 1960, the Assam government introduced a bill which, if passed, would make Assamese the only state language of Assam, which means children, Bengali children, would be forbidden from learning to speak or write Bangla in school. In May 1961, after 11 people were shot dead by the police in a peaceful protest against that bill, the government was forced to table it. But in the late 1970s, that movement gained prominence again. And in universities, several hundred Bengali students were either forced to flee or killed. My mom was caught smack in the middle of that conflict. A similar linguistic divide actually led to the creation of a whole new country, Bangladesh, in 1971. And they were fighting for their right to speak Bangla as opposed to Urdu, which was, supposed to be the state language. The United Nations honors their language martyrs by celebrating the International Mother Language Day every year on February 21st. Historically and currently, there's a lot of instances where you'll find, people trying to suppress another language. And I wish I could tell you that conflict is the only reason that languages start vanishing. It's not just the Indian subcontinent or the countries that have acquired independence in the last 80 years. According to the Atlas of World's Languages Endangered that's published by UNESCO, there are 576 critically endangered languages in the world today. And the highest numbers are in the Americas. These include the languages of the Navajo Nation, the Miami Nation, the Yuchi, and the Winnemem-Wintu tribe of California, right? What exactly is an endangered language? To go into the semantics of it. Linguists say that an endangered language is a language where the younger generation has stopped speaking it. But when a handful of people remain in this world that can speak a language, it becomes a critically endangered language. So I come from a city in India where Bangla was not taught. My mother language, Bangla, was not part of the curriculum. And most of my Bengali friends knew how to speak the language, but a lot of them didn't know how to write or read the language. And there were some who were outright embarrassed to be called a Bengali. That has happened. But it's very easy to say, oh, their parents are responsible for that. They should have taught the kids the language. But if you take a deeper look, you want to look at the global economics of it. Because everything that we learn today in school has a value proposition. And learning your mother language is perceived as seeing of no value. There's no monetary benefit. In fact, if you talk to a lot of immigrant parents today, they will tell you they'd rather have their child learn the majority language than have their child learn the mother language because it helps their children assimilate better. It helps them blend in better. And I know a lot of you are thinking the exact same thing. Why should I care that there are 7,000 languages in the world that could get extinct in the next 100 years? Why do I care? Because so many languages have become extinct before. Big deal, right? If you're an English speaker, Spanish, Arabic, Mandarin, your language is not going to become extinct in the next 100 or 200 years. You're fine. Honestly, should you care? Let me explain. If you look at the history of the world, a language enjoys power only when the people that speak it enjoy economic power. You're all familiar with the term lingua franca, I'm hoping, right? It was coined at a time when France dominated world trade. So if you didn't know French, you didn't know commerce, you couldn't do business. English became that language when the British Empire grew in size, right? Today, the top 5 languages that are spoken in the world belong to countries that play a very prominent role in global economics. So we talked about conflict, which is overt suppression of a language. And economics, by default, becomes covert suppression of a language or a linguistic identity, right? So what is a prominent language today could become an endangered language tomorrow. Can you imagine what we would lose if 300 years later there were 5 people in this world that could speak English? And we're talking about 7,000 languages. I want you to think about the magnitude of the loss if we lost these languages, right? So, scientific studies have proven that indigenous communities tend to thrive better when they're allowed, both economically and socially, when they're allowed to practice or choose a language and culture of their choice. In fact, a lot of studies have been done where they've shown that children that can speak 2 languages or go through bilingual education are actually more creative, they're sharper, and they reach full proficiency in both languages, unlike what a lot of people would like to believe. In addition, they average higher salaries, they have higher graduation rates, lower incarceration rates, and bilingual brains are actually healthier than monolingual brains, because if you know how to speak 2 languages, you're using more of your brain and keeping it active. Hey, so there is a benefit, actually, to being bilingual. I make this case for disappearing languages as a global citizen, not as an academic, not as a historian or archaeologist or any of that. Because when I pick up a Bangla poem by the great Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore, and I turn those pages, I feel the emotion that he meant for me to feel, and I feel it the way he felt it 100 years ago. Then I read it in English, and it's like, it doesn't resonate. Because there are so many words and phrases that you simply cannot translate or transcreate in English and retain that same eloquence. My mother language, Bangla, has taught me to appreciate so many other languages in the world: Tamil, Vietnamese, Spanish, German, even Assamese. Because it's taught me tolerance, and it has taught me to love other languages and respect other languages. And it has given me the courage to stand up and fight for your right to speak the language that is closest to your heart, whatever that may be. You know, enmeshed in ourselves, we have a lot of identities, right? We have a religious identity and a sexual identity, and we have our linguistic and our cultural identities. And all of it makes up who we are, what we believe in. What we don't realize is in that linguistic identity, there's buried literature, folklore, music, attire, dances, cuisine, that some are good, some are not so good, but at least you know them, and you can understand and analyze them. You can understand what these sub-identities contribute to your life, what is relevant to you today, and what is worth discarding. And that's why these linguistic identities are important to preserve. Because globalization is not about consuming and devouring smaller cultures into bigger cultures. They're about letting everyone thrive as independent troves of knowledge and life, so that we can truly become that one world that, United Airlines or American Airlines keeps boasting about, that one world. It's the only way you can do it. And it's very easy. For all of us here, it's very easy to do our bit. We start by not becoming part of the problem. Allow the minorities around you to celebrate their culture and express their culture freely, right? If you want to donate, if you've got some extra bucks, go ahead and donate to the Endangered Language Project of the National Geographic Society. There's the Committee for Language and their Endangered Languages and their Preservation by the Linguistic Society of Americas. And then there's the, I believe, the Commission for American Indian Languages that's run out of the Linguistic Department of University of Utah. And there are so many others. You just have to do a little search, and you'll find all of those there. You know, do your bit. But for those of us that do speak a second or a third language, build your communities. Enable people after you to love and learn that language so that it can flourish long, long after you're gone. And for all of us here, let's spread the message that no language is superior than the other, because language is a birthright. It's like the air you breathe and the water you drink. No one gets ownership of it. For me, I love to share my love for Bangla with other people who speak the language, simply because to me that makes my mom's struggles and efforts worthwhile. And even though her fight might be a thing of the past, there are many more in this world that need a champion. And together, all of us can go a long way to safeguard their right to speak their language. Thank you.